Hey guys, it's Derek here, and I'm gonna talk about right now my RTA experience and kind of who I think is the strong characters in the current meta. Now, currently I'm pre-banning Witch of the Mere Tenebria and Shepherd of the Dark Dien. As of I'm playing tank down style mainly now, after transitioning away from Cleave due to Monarch Azaria being a powerhouse against Zeo Cleave. So without actual speed, it's very hard to actually make use of that first turn, and I mainly first pick Yulhud, which is why she's the top of S tier, but my main DPS is Arunka, which is why she's next to it. Excuse me. Lady of the Scales, really strong first pick. I don't really play her as often as I let the enemy pick her, but she is very strong, and she's probably one of the more problematic characters to try to figure out a solution to when playing tank down with solo DPS Arunka. G-Ross right in contention with them, as G-Ross is a strong DPS. When you play Arunka, you can kind of ignore Ilinov with G-Ross. You don't care about her, and you play Ilinov. You play Ilinov a lot when you are doing tank down, so he will always be a very solid pickup as a very neutral DPS. Fire Cigarette coming up next is probably the strongest debuffer in the entire game. Really can't go wrong with her, as two-turn Fear will put the enemies in a very big limbo where they're just not getting their skills off. They're not building up souls. So in the long fights, she's just going to give you a lot of tempo, and her S2 gives a lot of burst damage to go with the tempo she creates with her S3, and artifacts like Goblet will just end up causing her to spam her abilities, so even cleansers cannot deal with her. We have Empilinov, who we just talked about, the strongest prot set knight in the game right now. Counters a lot of the DPSs, as a lot of damage relies on Pen. And then coming up is Ruel. Everyone knows Ruel is one of the stronger units in the game. Bypasses just straight up death. But I think it's kind of hard to play her in the current state of Tank Down, as believe it or not, Tank Down does not really like playing Ruel. It's mainly Cleave where Ruel succeeds in the most, reviving those DPSs that just keep wailing on your team. But she is still a strong pickup and can basically, if they don't have enough damage and have no way to kill Ruel, she can just keep reviving your DPS to just kill their team if they have no sustain. Now, basically, the tank down version of Ruel, in my opinion, is Maid Chloe. Maid Chloe reduces fixed damage, so stuff like Bellion, stuff like Scales, anything that's just dealing fixed damage. Even Monarch of these areas, she's one of the strongest ways to deal with Monarch of these areas' damage. And her revive is team wide, so you are always going to be like able to do more than just one unit with Ruel. Where when you're reviving only one unit with Ruel and tank down, your comp kind of is like built on all four units, not just one unit. So you can't really just DPS with just Ruel as your support. And Maid also provides defense buff, which keeps your team alive. Running her with Unfading Memory will give you the sustain you need. Brywitch Azaria is an S tier because she's a really good pick to stop people from basically revive cheesing you, which is current way of surviving the insane amount of damage in the game right now. But she has a lot of counters. It's really hard to fight her if there's scales with her. But outside of that, Elena, easy way to stop her S3 from being useful, and then just being able to have Arunka to stop maybe a pivot from Afternoon Soak Flan is good, but still a really solid defense break opener. And then we have Monarch of the Azaria. This character is really, really strong, though she has glaring weaknesses, but she has ways to still win even through them, but not in a way where it's completely oppressive if you do have her counters. But the problem with this game is it's not one dimensional. Her counters, like albeit strong, will not be able to stop her if she's being played in aggro or cleave setups. So more Setsuka, they're not going to be that useful if you're just aggroing with her. And when you play her, she just has so much damage to bypass a lot of her counters, like Maid Chloe or Ilinov. So, like, she's going to be a very versatile. And then she gives CR push to be utility wise. Bellion, in my opinion, Bellion has fallen off inviability with the buffs of LRK as well as Monarch Azaria, but she's still very strong when those two are not in play. 3F is the build I use right now, and she does dish out a lot of damage, especially when you can get Yulha and Scales together. Uh, I think Pront set tank down Bellion is viable, but it's still not as useful as Empyrean Ilinov is in these comps, so you would rarely pick it in my opinion, at least for my style. Then we have Fallen Cecilia, who, when you can't really play Maid Chloe and Empyrean Ilinov is banned or taken, she fills in the fixed damage uh, knight in that spot, and you can play her with Ruel instead of Maid, as it's kind of redundant to have both fixed damages unless you're not playing it FCC on 3. But that's kind of it. She's just your tank. New Moon Luna. New Moon Luna has very good debuffs. Ceiling is always going to be strong. Being able to follow up with like Belly and S1 and Soulburn into like a Maid Chloe that's sealed will just dish out a lot of damage. Uh, her damage in itself is already strong, so you can play her as a DPS if you have Yulha on your team. And well as having Book will always be nice to be able to Soulburn important skills at the start of the game. We have Sea Phantom Polly, who we know at the early season was a menace, where if you could have just enough speed, you can just bypass all mechanics in the game. But now that the game state has kind of shifted a little into more cleave than straight up aggro, we're seeing a lot of people playing Ran. We're seeing a lot of people play Briar Witch's area, and we're seeing a lot of Renox come out. So she's not going to be reliably taking a turn over those units unless you're just gear gapping, which is not a viable strat to maintain. We have Ran next, and I think the reason why Ran is coming up in playability is due to Shepherd of the Dark DN just being such a good first pick with Ran, as well as the seals just allowing him to S3 raw and not worry about cleansers like Dilibet, Alena, etc. And him being able to restrict as well as Frostbite is just one of the best debuffers for just one-shotting people compared to Briar Witch's area, who does not have that same damage amp. And then we have Freyrin, who, as we know, she bypasses a lot of mechanics, so she's always going to be a very strong pick when her raw counters aren't in play. And we've had Arya buff, and Arya really does not have enough in her kit to deal with Freyrins, unless you're playing tank down and they have a way to reach the Freyrin. Uh, that was all of S tier. I think these characters are all going to be very important things to know how to draft and when to draft. And then like into A tier, I think these A tier characters, they are very good. But they are just not as quite as versatile as the S tier characters, as their counters can leave them just being unable to play the game. And first off, we have Renok. Renok, when they have Empyrean Ilinov and some sort of anti-fixed damage, or even Bunny Dom, it's really hard to get her going. And I feel like if you're not aggroing with Renok and you're not playing fully around her on third pick, and Harcity's banned, it's really hard for her to pop off. As let's say if they have Bunny Dom, your S2 gives you so much stats that by like Battle Frenzy 6, you could have like 3 Pilfers and just be able to stat check them tank wise and damage wise. And now that like if you, all these counters are in play, it's really hard to get to that win state, so you're banking off her first turn and basically characters like Saria, Emil Sharoon, or Robin to clean up after that first turn. So I think her playability has decreased massively, but she's still a very strong character. Next we have Spirit Iceline, and she's basically one of the strongest characters if you play Protect the Celine comp. The there's little to no counterplay to it unless you have a way to stop her from S3ing turn 1 or make her S3 not useful with like stuff like Hellion Lua and Hecate, but it's really unreliable as there's just many ways to just protect her even through those characters. But the problem is if you have no way to protect her, like if you try to play her when Bellion is open, try to play her without a Runka on your team and Lady of the Scales on your team, it's really hard to really stop her from dying. So that's why I wouldn't put her in S tier. Next we have LRK. This character is insanely strong into AoE DPSs. Freyrin, Bellion, and even stuff that you don't often see like Malona and Landy. He does a great job at just removing their threats for the first couple AoEs, as well as dishing out equally as intense damage. So, and reducing skill cooldown, I think, is really nice when you're playing things like Maid Chloe and Ruel. So you can just spam your survivability to just win the game through the long run, as it gives you a lot of sustain. Hellion Lua, I think this character is very underrated, but the problem is without Soulburn, her consistency will dwindle, and after her first S3, she has a long downtime, and it really feels like during that downtime you could just be punished by the sheer damage or the sheer debuffs that the enemy could dish out while they're not provoked. Para, very strong unit, but because anti-fix damage is such a huge thing, as well as cleansers not really being that strong anymore as debuffs are too strong, she's kind of fallen off in viability. But she is still good when the situation arises where you can play stuff like that benefits from swift attack buff to like take a turn right after their first turn. Strays still just kills through Ilinov, so you need a lot of things to stop him from killing, but the situations where he is good have fallen down due to the fact that Ahmed is kind of not playable, at least not to the extent she was before. Successor Teiyu, probably one of the best 4/5s in the game if you have a character that can initiate him. Not much to say outside of that. Elena, probably the best counter to Briarwitch's area, being able to remove souls if you use one of the Aspa artifacts. That's like Magahar's Tomb, but if you don't have it, Magahar's Tomb is just as good. And she's able to cut and then invincibility your whole team to disrupt the tempo of the enemy. Fire Flan is one of the best dual attackers, DPSs in the game, and dishes out a lot of damage where she is able to take multiple turns. And as it's really hard to say which build is the best. Like the speed one, the Destro Torrent, and the Repost have their viabilities, but the problem with her mainly is Arunka is a menace where if you can't decide a target, her dual attacks aren't as impactful. Aki, if you have a way to basically get him a turn before he takes any damage and he spams Soul Burn, he's very strong. But the problem is he's not as viable into Arunka, and he is very susceptible to just being straight up tanked by just base speed, full bulk units. So I wouldn't say he's that oppressive as he could have been if we weren't in a very what is it, anti extra turn meta where like if you have Bdom or Arya, you basically cannot play him. It's force bans, so you get to kind of create a good situation if he is picked outside of last pick. Uh, Festive Ida, Soulburn, defense break silence, very strong as we don't really play cleansers anymore in the game. They're not viable, as well as being able to punish people if they break her out of stealth with insane amount of fixed damage or additional damage. I mean, very high stun rate on her S1 when stealthed, so she's able to do a lot of things. Naqual, I think Naqual has very good skills for the current state of the game, being able to seal a target when there's a lot of passives, as well as bind, being very strong into the current meta tank down units like Arunka, Spirit Isoline, and then we also can probably have viability into Monarch Azaria, but I haven't tested myself, but in theory, I think she will be good. And then next to her is Fire Lytica, who have actually played a decent amount after Monarch Azaria came out, and she's seeing a lot of success, and it feels really nice when she's let through and is able to just stop Monarch from stacking up, as well as give skill nulls and defense breaks important targets. Very solid, but very situational. And then Setsuka. I think Setsuka has fallen way out of the meta of tank down, but when you kind of have no idea what to play, enemies kind of overwhelming you, and they don't have any way to deal with evasion, She can be a quick get out of jail card from a very sticky situation, as well as give good utility and damage overall, where you can't really be punished that often when you play her if the enemy does not have Fire Cigarette. Death Dealer Ray, I think, is the second strongest debuffer in the game behind Fire Cigarette in terms of non-seal debuffers. His S3 gives basically like one turn downtime on the enemy team, and there's no RNG with them waking up early. Dishes out good damage, but I think the main reason why he's not as viable as he was before is due to characters like Yulha being able to cleanse one buff, and also I would say Dragon King Shroom kind of being a decent character into Fire Sacred, so you can't pick both. Uh, as well as, in my opinion, G Ross and Bystander Hua ignoring the debuffs, so that he's not as useful if they have a way to just ignore debuffs in general. And then I won't really go over B, C, and D because I think these characters, they're very old, they're very self-explanatory where they're good, and they're just situational characters where when they are good, they will be very useful to your team. Like, for example, I would just say like Lionheart Sermian, the dual attackers, Fern if they have no real like sustain, uh, Zeo if they're banking on taking first turn for their whole comp to work, and Dark Corvus if they have no Penres and they're like a very slow comp that you can just get one shot right off the bat. But yeah, that's my opinions, and I think that's about it. If you want any more questions on maybe characters I didn't explain, ask me in the comments below.